Hello YouTube, Jerry Kirkpatrick here, and this is the disc sander that I built back in 1972 when I opened my first shop in Venice, California, and every shop that I've had since then has been a pretty good sized shop where I could keep all of my abrasives, sanding dust and such away from my mill and lathe, which are actually maybe 10 or 15 feet away. So I was using the sander just the other day, and I just made a mess all over these two benches in front and behind me. And after I took the video of using it, I could see that they were arching way over my head and getting very close to my mill. So I decided that what I want to do is build a catcher, a dust catcher for underneath. And I have one small piece of stainless steel that I'm going to use. So by using the dimensions that I have, I came up with a design like this. It'll go right behind the disc and it'll catch everything that goes here in about a 2.5, maybe 3 inch wide piece. Also, after seeing all of those sparks flying all over the place behind me, I want to make a shield that will start right at the table, just above, maybe a 1/2 inch or so above the table here, come all the way over the disc and stop about 4 inches from the top of the platen here. And I want to be able to make that so I can take it off, turn it around, and then protect from the top of the platen over to about 4 inches on the opposite side. And the reason that I want to make that to work on either side is because I'm going to use or install a forward and reverse switch on this. Several times I've only been able to use it because it turns in this direction. Several times I've wanted to use the other side, and when I couldn't turn the part upside down or manipulate it in some way to get where I needed to get, and I couldn't get it on this side, I wish I had the opportunity to use this side of the grinder. So I'd have to finish that part off with a hand sander, one of my air tools, or back then an electric, a 4-inch grinder. So let me get this platen off, and you'll be able to see why this has to be this wide. If you look at the sparks coming off of the disc when it's on the outside, there's a piece that slides here that makes it come straight down, and they'll hit this area here, or if it's turning in the opposite direction, they'll be funneled down in this way. So let me get this off, and I'll show you how I intend to make this and then affix it to the table that it's sitting on. So there is approximately a 1/2 inch between the front edge of the stand and the back edge of the platen itself, or the disc. So there's plenty of room to slide the stainless steel up in here. And if you notice, there's a rectangle tube here, 1x2 rectangle tube here and on the other side. And if you take a look at the picture of when I'm grinding on the outer edge of the disc, nothing comes past this because there's a piece that slides in here. So the sparks are no more than here. You can see here where they hit the leg, and then they start sloughing off to the other side here. The same thing will happen here. They'll be coming straight down and well inside this 1x2 tube. So the distance I figured there is about 14 inches. That gets me to the center of this tube, and the same on the other side. The legs on this stand are tilting forward as you get to the bottom. That's why it's not hitting until here. So I had to make a cut when that's about in place. If you measure plumb down here, at this point it starts going behind this leg. So I brought it into 7 inches, which clears both legs, and then brought this down to 5 inches down here. And the way I'm going to hang this is 1 inch down and 2 inches over, which would be about here. I'm going to put a 1032 screw, one on either side. Just with the, well, I have some AN 1032s, which some of them have a very narrow shoulder just below the head. So it's a solid piece of 3/16 round, which will accept the vibration and the abuse of hanging a piece like this. And then on this piece here, I'm going to make a keyhole, which is a small hole right there with a slot, and then another hole that is big enough for the head of the screw, the 1032 screw, to slip through there. So I can pull this up, slide it over the head of the screw, drop it down, and it'll be in place. Where this comes down in here, this will be sticking out 2.5, 3 inches. I haven't decided yet, but there will be another 1032 screw here and on the other side that will be on a L bracket. It'll be welded to the side of the stainless steel, come over here, and then 2 screws will hold it in place. So with all that said, let's get over to the table and start laying out. I'll lay it out first and then plasma cut 2 pieces just like this. Okay, so I got my stainless steel laid on the table, and I have the pattern that I want to plasma cut out. So I'm going to take a block of steel and set it right up tight against the top edge. Slide my pattern right up there, square it up, Move this over till I have the same distance on each side. Mark the top. I'm going to lay another weight right there so it doesn't shift around. I'm going to mark the bottom, so when I mark the top, I'll know where the center of both of these pieces are, and that will be the total length of the funnel itself. There you can see half of it marked out. Let me turn this around, get the other side marked, and I'll show you the whole layout before we start cutting. So there you have both pieces. I'll cut right down through the middle of here, and that will give me two pieces exactly the same shape. So I've got my plasma cutter already set up. It's on the same stand that my bead roller and planishing hammer is on. It just sits down underneath. I hook it up to 220, hook up the ground to this plate here. As long as I'm touching this, I'm good to go, even though this is a wooden table. But I'll get this off to the side a little bit, clamp up my square, and I'll bring you back. So if you're wondering why I use a square to run my plasma cutter up against, the diameter of the nozzle is 1/4 inch in diameter, so I set my square 1/8 of an inch over from the line that I want to cut. And then right here, that little dot, I doubt you can see it, there's a little dot right there where it makes the transition from this angle to this angle. So I have this leg of the square 1/8 of an inch past where I want to cut. So all I have to do is put my plasma cutter up against the square here, just draw it down. As soon as it hits this edge of the square, I know I'm at the transition mark between these two angles. So there's side one. I will turn this around, do exactly the same thing on the other side, and then we'll start laying out for the holes and the keyholes that'll go up into these top corners. So here I have all of the parts cut out. I think you saw the laying out of that one single sheet. That's all I had. So I had to figure out how to get both the front and the back and the two sides out of that one sheet, and I did it. So here are the front and the back. I spent last night deburring everything. It took quite a while, as you know, with stainless steel. The plasma cutter did not leave that big of a burr, so it came off quickly. Only took me about an hour, hour and a quarter to do all of the parts. So there's the front and the back. And that left me with two pieces in this shape. And I measured the sides, the total from here to here, and came up with pieces this long. And those came out of, obviously, the rim that I had left over. So I laid those out and made my cuts. And you may ask, how was it that I arrived at this height? If you remember when I was telling you about how it was going to be made over at the disc grinder, I wasn't sure of the width of the funnel that I was going to be making. Well, while I was laying everything out and cutting, cleaning, I had two blocks on the table. So I took the first one, took my Milwaukee Sharpie and made a line, took a look at it, and I said, oh no, that's way too narrow. So I also had on the table this bigger block. I sat that on there, put the marker up there, made a line, took a look at it, and I said, yeah, that ought to be wide enough, because if I wanted it any wider, I would have had to go and get another piece of material to set the Sharpie up. Since this was an arbitrary width anyway, this is what we wound up with. So the next thing we've got to do is lay out for the two 1032 screws that are going to go on the top portion of the framework that the disc grinder is sitting on. So here we have the disc grinder. Here's the stand. I just put a piece of tape on either side. I measured down 1 inch and then in an inch and a half. I thought I was going to come in 2, but that got me too close to the thing to get a good mark in here. So the next thing I'm going to do is put a center punch mark. And since this is not a given width, when I built this stand, I just put it together, made sure that the two long legs were parallel and that the corners lined up when I welded them. So from center to center is not a typical dimension. After grinding the edges, these two centers could be any distance apart. So what I did was take the back portion that I cut out, put it up in here, leveled out both the top, and moved it back and forth until I got a good dimension, an equal distance on both of these sides. And then, as you can see here, from the back side, I made a mark here and here. So from one of these sides, I'll come over the 1.5 inches. The distance to the next one would be somewhat arbitrary. So what I'm going to do is take my trammel, put that in the first center punch mark, slide this one out until I am in the center punch mark, and tighten that up. Okay, now I can make my first hole for a 1032 screw on the other piece, and then I will know this is the distance that the second one has to match. So let me drill and tap both of these 1032. So now I've got both holes drilled, countersunk, and tapped, and I've got one 1032. Now these are, as I mentioned earlier, these are AN screws. You can see right under the head is a space. I have just a ton of AN screws, 1032s, and so I was lucky enough to find two of them with that little shoulder in there. So the way I'm going to affix these is I'm going to screw them all the way in, with a piece of the sheet metal behind it. That's tight. Now I'm going to come back a full half a turn. That'll allow me to get that the rear portion of this funnel under that screw easily. And I just counted the flats. Wherever the flat was, I went 180. That brought it out to where I can get that stainless behind that screw head. The next thing to do is lay out the rear portion of the funnel, the one that'll be getting the key slots in them. One for here, one for here. Let's get over on the table and we'll lay those key slots out. So for those of you who don't know what a keyhole is, the keyhole allows for the head of the screw to pass through, and then it slides up into a nominal size, which is the shank size of the screw. So when you put the, well, in this case, the back of the funnel over the screw, it just slides down and is captured up in this area here. Head goes through, slides up, and then this diameter is just barely over a clearance size for the shank. The 3/8 size is so the head of the screw can pass through, and I elected to have the centers between the smaller hole and the larger hole 3/8 of an inch. No, that's not 3/8. Between them, and that allows me a small amount in between the two holes, so one hole doesn't have to tear through the other. That's how I arrived at the dimensions for the keyhole that we'll be laying out on the rear portion of the funnel. So to lay out the hole position for the keyhole that'll be up in this area, if you remember, I made a mark on the outside in both places for the edge of the table that the disc grinder is sitting on. And the hole was a 1.5 in from each side. And this side is going to be arbitrary. I'm going to lay out this side and then lay out this side on the layout from this keyhole, just to get myself a placement for the tape. I'm going to just make a line 1.5 inches, and then make another one 1.5 inches. And I'll lay a piece of tape. Now it's down. I have this up against this fence here. The first hole is down 1 inch, so I don't have to be right up against there. I can start that tape right around there, and I should be able to get a pretty good layout anywhere on that tape. Take another piece and put it right there. Now I can come over my 1.5 inches. The first hole is 1 inch. The second hole is 1 3/8 inches. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. 1 inch. An 1 3/8 inches. Inch. Now I know that this whole layout from side to side is exactly the same as it was over on the disc grinder itself. So I'm going to drill the smaller hole in the top, the larger hole in the bottom, and then we'll try it over on the disc grinder. Now with a slight amount of, well, deburring mainly, filing on each of the keyholes. This just sits right down on there, centered, and this is going to work out great. The next thing to do is bend up the sides to follow this contour and start welding it up. So it's been a couple of weeks since I finished those little angled brackets because of some surgery. I was kind of down for 2 weeks, if not more, and I'm finally back. I feel well enough to get back out in the shop, and so let's finish this stainless steel catch can I have made for the disc grinder. So here is the catch can, all finished. I've got both ears just welded on, and this thing fits just perfectly. Slide up there, put it on the keyholes, and it slides right in place. Holes line up. Let me get a new disc on here, and I'll put the table on, put the 2 screws in, obviously, and then we'll do a little grinding and see where the sparks go. Now, before we get to making some sparks here, I don't know where the sparks are going to go as they come out the funnel there. So I just put a piece of wood down underneath there, and I have a stainless steel pan that I can put right there. And after I watch the video, I'll see what happens if they are slowed down enough to rest in the bottom of the pan. I'm pretty much there. But if the sparks are just flying all over the place, obviously I'm going to have to figure out some kind of container to keep the sparks from coming back out. So let me get the grinder started here. We'll come back and we'll see how we did. Well, from what I could see as I was grinding, it didn't look too bad. It may need to come up a little bit higher, the catch can I'm talking about. And I'll see what I can do to raise that up some. I might even have to put a piece behind it so they don't bounce in and then bounce out from behind. All of that will be looked at a later date. So that's about it for this build. The next thing I want to do is build a shield that will go over here. That would be a reversible. So I'll have a shield that will come just about 4 inches here, pick it up, turn it around, and have it come to about the same place over here. And then the last thing to do will be the forward and reverse switching. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this build. I know it took a lot longer, but it was a lot longer for me. I hate it when I can't get out in the shop and do what I want to do. So please give me a thumbs up. Buy me a coffee if you wish. See you later.